Hello, Reanimated fans. Greetings and salutations. I'm H.A. Conrad, coming to you from Brooklyn, and here as always with my intrepid co-host, Stuart Tiffin. Hello, Stuart.
Bonjour.
From the West Coast, not France, as you may have worried hearing his greeting.
You might have been concerned given that amazing delivery.
You might have been super concerned.
Most of the times I speak French to a French person, they go, excuse me?
That's generally the reaction when anybody speaks, any American French to a French person. Usually they kind of like
respond in English with a inquisitive
English and just like, yeah, nice try. And you know what? I don't necessarily blame.
I can't blame them, dude. You know what? This show that we're going to be talking about Daryl Dixon today, by the way, peeps. And it as usual. When I hear French spoken, it is not at all like the school French that I learned. It is kind of just how it always goes. And although I did do a couple of French exchanges, I was a bad French student. And that legacy is carried on into my adulthood. So I can't blame the French for speaking English to me because my French is not good.
Agree. Same. I can read it. I can generally understand it if I try really hard, but my speaking abilities are very poor. So anyway, I cannot blame that. So in any case, we're talking about Daryl Dixon today. Before we get to that, we have a couple of little news items. And there is a little update to the Romero Twilight of the Dead project, which it now has a director attached, Brad Anderson, I believe.
That's the name of the gentleman.
Yep. So it seems like it's actually moving forward, at least to some extent. To the extent that we know, we'll see what happens.
Well, the movie's going to be called Twilight of the Dead. I don't know if we knew that before.
We did.
Maybe we did. Okay. But this is the 7th and final installment. So they're putting a pin in it. And there's a Romero. Suzanne is one of the producers.
Yep. So... we shall see what happens with this, but this is a little bit more motion forward. But there's still a lot of a lot of variables, a lot of things that are very vague. There's a lot of, we expect to move forward with the production, et cetera, et cetera. And again, you'd have to see what happens with the writer, the SAG-AFTRA strike and all that fun stuff. I guess it depends on where they actually do it. So, typically these types of films have been sort of outside of the regular industry, but I still think that my guess is that there's probably way too much money attached to this to try to couch it as a indie film, but we'll see. So there's that. And then you found this Aquaman 2 trailer thing, which, definitely some hints of the undead in this.
Yeah, if you go to what minute was it? The trailer's kind of long. It's 2 minutes and really 40 seconds long. But if you start the trailer at 1 minute and 38 seconds, and this is where I find this Film Spot on YouTube, 1 minute and 38 seconds, they start talking about Manta. He's back in the sequel, everybody, and he has some sort of thing that maybe has allowed him to tap into a world of undead mer creatures. You get a real quick glimpse of them on screen, so there might be Aquaman undead theme in the sequel that's coming out in December. The first one was pretty entertaining, if a bit bloated. This one looks the same.
All right, well,
bit
bloated, but we shall see. But now to our main course of this lovely little podcast. So the long-awaited Daryl Dixon Walking Dead spinoff is out. This is the first episode, and it is definitely very French.
It's not very French. I think it's pretty watered down.
No, it is watered down, but it is.
I wonder how much French cultural consultants that they even had on it. I know they shot in France and everything, and they have French actors, but I don't know. It feels like he's running into a lot of people who speak English.
Yeah, well, I mean, again, that is the thing, is that generally people do speak English, and
I mean, not maybe in Paris, but he's in the countryside near Marseille, right? That's where That's where he
Yeah,
rolls
I
up.
guess a little less, but I don't know. I still think generally a lot of younger people do speak English, at least as I've
Yeah,
seen.
maybe. But it's also how we don't know where he when he is in the apocalypse. Dead City was something like 15 years, I think, at least in the future, or after Z Day. We don't know when Dixon's taking place, but it's probably around the same time or within 5 years on either side. Um, so people like we meet some children in this. We meet some young people who would have had all of their English learning in a traditional school setting um, after the apocalypse, I guess, which is possible given some of the settings that this story seems to have started in, at least. But like a character like Maribel, who
Yeah.
cracked me up, but seems to have learned English on the internet,
Mhm.
and she doesn't seem that old,
She
you
learned
know.
it from her, you know, I don't know. Anyway.
What's
Um,
cracking noob is her introductory English statement.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's fantastic. So I'm curious how they're going to continue with this. There was English in there were very few French only scenes
Mm.
in this episode. Um, and I guess they're trying to make it approachable for an American audience who maybe, but I've got to wonder what the balancing act is of that. Daryl Dixon, very popular character, American audience mostly, I assume, and they're going to make it in subtitles. And he doesn't speak French as one would expect of a Daryl Dixon, right?
Yeah.
So it's just an interesting puzzle that I look
I don't
forward to
know. He
seeing them
might
unravel.
bust out his fluency in French later.
I
We'll
mean, he
see.
learned sign language pretty quickly on the show, didn't he?
I mean, he's pretty skilled in figuring things out in survival. I
Mm-hmm.
kind of feel like he has it in him to learn another language. That's all.
He could. You're right. Did you happen to notice her name popped up on the screen like a long time into the show, frankly? But did you notice who one of the executive producers was? One of our favorite people,
Oh, I didn't.
Angela Kang.
Oh, nice. I guess I missed that, but that's awesome.
Yeah, I mean it's honestly it's way into the story by the time her name pops up because it feels like the credits just go on for a good 10 minutes. But Angela Kang is involved in the show. I thought she'd kind of put it all in the back in the rear view, but she was still supposed to be working with AMC, as I recall, just
Hmm.
on different stuff. Um anyway, so it feels it feels good. Honestly, I really like this first episode. I don't know where you landed on it. I felt like it felt fresh in a way because they got rid of so many, like got rid of the whole cast. Like you don't have to worry about all that.
Um, yeah, I actually was this was good. I enjoyed this first episode a lot more than the I know I'm gonna call it the wrong thing. The
The
Dead
Dead
City.
City.
The Dead City.
Well, Dead City had a decent pilot also, although it was a little bit weird.
Yeah,
But yeah, go on.
I do like that they basically start this out in a, it's not his journey to France, which is what we were a little worried about. Like, is it going to be um a lot of showing how he gets there, but they don't do that. This is really this right off the bat. He's like in France. So I mean, I'm sure they're going to do flashbacks eventually, how he got there, and they did a little bit of that at least to show how he ended up, almost like shipwrecked. Um, and so there were a lot of questions, and some of them were answered in that last scene for me. Um, just in terms of like, hey, how did he end up? I was like, you see him on this like weird little boat, like a little lifeboat, and you're just like, there's no way Daryl like rode all the way across the ocean, right? But then you could also see them a scenario where they'd be like, yeah, sure, why not?
Well, I'm glad that they didn't decide to go,
But
yeah,
I'm
sure,
glad
why
they
not?
didn't do that. But we don't find that out till later. But
Yeah.
anyway, it's very much like a shipwreck thing. Um, and then there's like a lot of, sort of him trying to figure out exactly where he is because he doesn't know and, kind of like rummaging around. I did like his sort of wandering through like the abandoned little towns. I thought that was kind of cool and just sort of but there's a couple of mysterious things that they do here which felt to me a little bit odd and a little bit forced, and one of them is when he ends up on that boat with the tape recorder. Like, I don't know, why would he even play it? Would their batteries work? There's also a lot of him drinking random water that's been hanging out for a really long time that I
The
think,
bucket on the beach. I'm like,
yeah,
that's gonna be salt water, dude. You're under the high tide line, but no, he
right.
just
I
drinks it
like so
down.
he comes like right at and grabs this bucket, drinks it, and I was like, this doesn't even make sense. And as a survival, like a person that's like a survivalist, which he definitely is, he would know better, even as thirsty as he might be. And then he finds like a random bottle of it, almost like half drunk water.
Oh yeah, it's the
Um,
best stuff when you're thirsty. I mean, that one was way better than the bucket water, which was
I
probably
guess, but
100% salt water.
It's not sealed. It could still be growing things, and
Oh
like
sure, yeah.
I don't know. I just don't feel like he'd do it. It's
I
so
think when you're thirsty enough, you're gonna drink. You'll. I think that that's fairly.
I don't know, Stuart. I don't know. I think that's just he wouldn't put his life into the hands of this like little cesspool of what bottled water. But in
Well,
any
AJ,
case,
this is why we wouldn't survive the zombie apocalypse because you'd be like, I'm not drinking that.
maybe
Meanwhile, like 2 days later, somebody else finds your body. Just like wouldn't drink the water is the epitaph.
it's possible. It's totally possible. But anyway, he's like going around. There's these clues. Like I don't know. Like he's learning about this family. Maybe he's just starved for like any kind of interaction. So fine. I guess you can have the batteries work, but I think that's weird that they do. And he's listening to this little tape recorder, and then he like tapes himself, and okay, cool, cool,
Did he
got
tape
that
over
going
the other
on.
guy's tape?
Yeah,
Do you
it's
think?
like what? I don't know. I don't know. I'd like to
It's
think
a
he.
heart-wrenching story about this Irish family who like set out from southeastern Ireland, hit up a couple places in the UK, then France, all the way around Spain, and then eventually like put in at Marseille. And he said it was something like 19 months on the boat or something like that.
Yeah.
Uh, trying to find somewhere safe, which puts that tape at like 10 plus years old. Also, the batteries definitely would not be still alive.
Yeah. So anyway, we got that going on and then him wandering around. Um Again, there's like a couple of things they do which you don't totally, I guess he's just comfortable pretty much walking into a situation, but there's this whole thing where he walks in and, they're sort of like dormant walkers and they're a new type of walker and they call them something else, right? Lurkers.
Brûlant, they're
They
brûlant.
call them brûlants, but there was also like in the subtitles it calls them a lurker or something.
I
Um
didn't. I did not see
and
that.
so
But
this is
they were all lying down when he walked in, and on the door, there was like they're showing how he is kind of disabled in this way in France because he doesn't. I mean, maybe he wouldn't have paid attention to a warning sign anyway. But on the door, it said "les affamés" or something inside the hungry. I think
yeah,
was
it's like dead inside, the same thing that they would do in America,
right,
except in France.
which maybe he would have ignored it anyway.
I
But
don't.
and he'd walk past other graffiti too. I think they're going to be doing things with French graffiti in this show, which I'm kind of excited for. The other one that he walked by was what the hell was it? Pouvoir des vivants, which is like the powers of the living or something along those lines,
Hmm.
which clearly plays into this too. And then later he's reading a sign when he has a little guidebook and he's like translating it, which is how he finds out. Well, which is how he knows where he is in a way when he gets to the convent later, because it's a convent flyer for the Union of Hope, that God loves you, I think is what it said. Yeah. Anyway, I'm a sucker for burying like contextual storytelling, and so they do it with these signs, which he in this case ignores and walks into the warehouse, where a whole bunch of zombies get up, and these are a variant that we have not yet run into. The variant that we know about is strong and fast, kind of right, like, or no, climbers.
Hmm.
Climbers are the ones we ran into at the end of season 11. Strong and fast, I think, are the ones we saw in the was it the World Beyond, maybe the end credits, which was in France, and they were like breaking a door open, a metal
Hmm.
door. And then these ones have these weird raised veins on their arms, faces, and chests. And when they touch Daryl, one of them puts a hand on him, it burns him. And apparently, we find out later, can spread. So not only a bite, but now a touch. This is very bad news for the zombie apocalypse.
Yeah, and
Um,
the way that I mean, it's like almost like an acid burn, and I mean, admittedly, when I saw it happen, I mean, I would think that he would freak out a little bit more than he did, honestly, but I guess he didn't have too much time. But like, it's anything where they infect you, like, or have some kind of like interaction like that, you would imagine it's going to cause some consternation and concern. But he doesn't seem, he seems like, God damn, like it hurt or whatever, but he doesn't seem all that concerned. And I guess for the burner stuff, at least as we find out later, there's a way to stop it, but I guess it's not as quickly moving as a bite or whatever, because well,
I
the
was
kid.
half convinced they were going to cut his arm off for the
I thought
show.
they were going to too, and I was like, oh, okay,
Oh,
well,
that's going to be tough for Norman Reedus, but okay.
yeah. But anyway,
We get a bunch of like nice shots of him walking across the French countryside, southern France, a lot of white rock, old aqueducts, probably dating back to the Roman Empire. I do love seeing this stuff. Gives me a real wanderlust. It's kind of like Daryl's doing his European vacation in the zombie apocalypse, which is cool. And then he gets into that warehouse and then is like back on the road, which is and back on the road is where he sees that sign. He sees the person watching him, who we see, and they watch each other for a second, and then he stumbles into Mirabelle and Guillaume, who are in theory granddaughter and grandfather. That might actually be true, but I don't know.
hard to.
Um, Hard to tell. And at first, I thought Mirabelle was maybe that young man that we'd been seeing in the trailers, because they both have long brown hair. There's not a whole lot of other resemblance, but
Hmm.
first episode, I was like, oh, is this like, wow, how convenient that he's just meeting this kid that apparently the show is all about. But no, she turns out to be Mirabelle, who says, "What's cracking, noob?" And then they talk a little bit about World War II and about whether or not they can travel together. And they share food for medicine, because he has managed to scrounge up quite a lot of stuff. And this also introduces the first of several scenes of vehicles sneaking up on people, which I guess if this episode has an
Yeah,
Achilles heel, it's this. It's that these
there's a couple
gas
like no,
jeeps.
there's a couple things like this, but yes. However, I there's one uh you know, um there's one exception to this where Daryl's like, yeah, I hear a car, I'm gonna get off the road.
Yeah,
But
but
in
yeah,
it's
they I was like, oh, does Daryl have a superpower? But in that case, there were three vehicles. Every other time, it was just one rolling up. But there's three other times during the show when a vehicle has managed to get within definite earshot of an engine and people, and they just have no idea. And then, like, as an audience,
yep.
in one of those scenes, as an audience, we can hear it for like several seconds before the people turn
And
around and look at it.
and the players just don't really react very much. So I'll admit to you that in this first instance, I was like, oh, do they know these guys? Like, are they part of their crew? And this is like them doing, because like it was really that I thought was kind of confusing just because nobody was reacting in the way that you think they would in this situation, given all the, I mean, especially Daryl, like Daryl's had a lot of experience with a lot of different types of big bads, and like
Yeah.
this just felt a little weird to me. Like,
It
so
feels weird. I mean, he gets up and he gets a little bit defensive looking, but the problem is that they had it come through the gates into this compound that where they're sitting with zero notice, so he has no chance to do much. But yeah, and we still don't really know who these guys are, the guerriers, the soldiers, and what their purpose is, what their role is. Are they saviors? Not sure, but certainly later on in this episode, they're all like community people. People know who they are, and they've got history. But in this case, they don't know Maribel, Guillaume, or Daryl. And this is one of the few scenes in the show that is all in French, uh, with Daryl not speaking and the French people talking to him in French. Um, and Maribel sort of saying like he's an American, he just showed up here, we don't know. And actually, this scene does not have a lot of subtitles either, because she translates for him what they're saying. Like, you need to sit down. I thought this was like, personally, this is kind of what I want. I
mm,
want to get that feeling of lost in translation, like where you just don't know you don't know
yeah,
what's going on. And so you can see Daryl's confusion. And I also think Norman Reedus is doing a good job. I mean, his face often kind of looks a little bit like hard to read.
Yep.
But he is a little more hard to read here, or a little more like what's happening. He seems definitely like a fish out of water.
In that a little bit about his lack of understanding to sort of, but he can read a room, and I think he sees like some of the tension, and it ends up
He really acts like quite rashly, or I don't know, like he doesn't have a lot of facts when he goes into action mode here.
true.
Like he doesn't know why they're taking Maribel because that's kind of what they decide to do. They're like, all right, you're gonna come with us. And she's fighting back, like she doesn't want to go with them. So maybe that's all it takes. Maybe he's like somebody's being taken against their will.
And
I
then
am Daryl
yeah,
Dixon.
he's
I will kill someone, and so he kills someone right away. What did you think of their gear? Like all these vehicles are like clearly modded.
they're
Um,
modded, they're tricked out. It
yeah,
seems like a lot of wasted fuel, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's some other saying that they're, again, this is one of those things where it's like, okay, these like marauders are out there. There's probably a limited amount of fuel. But
well, the fuel that they would have had from before is no good, but they must have come up with a way to make
no,
fuel,
it
whether
seems like
it's
they have some
yeah,
bio something going
yeah.
on. I don't know.
So yeah, which is why the vehicle modifications make sense. Like they're using corn or whatever, right? Or yeah.
Yeah.
And then
Some
their gear is like it's kind of funny that the production has decided to go with, yeah, in France, everything is from the Middle Ages. Like that's just
or
how
a
it
little bit from like there's like a very odd like conglomeration of themes in this. So there's that, but there's also a little bit of the Mad Max thing because you got a lot of like face tats happening,
a lot of face tats on these
modded
guys.
vehicles. Like it's sort of
And
like
flintlock pistols and
yeah, yeah,
muskets.
yeah. You got a lot of like weird like cross pollination here in terms of different genres, but yeah, yeah. So
I mean,
medieval weapons, cool, cool.
I know that yeah, they have a modern military. It's a modern culture. It's a like, or it was when the zombies showed up. It would be like having the Americans running around with muskets because they raided a museum. Maybe there's more of that stuff in France. Almost certainly there is. I mean, they have castles and stuff with they're just full of old weapons and suits of armor. But it feels a little bit cliche, I guess. But it's also makes for interesting storytelling. I just think that it doesn't seem very realistic,
Yeah,
and it feels a little bit patronizing to the French story.
it does. It does.
Maybe this is only going to be in this part of France, like in this southern area of France, and as they go north, which I think is going to be the plot of the show, it'll that'll change. We'll see, I guess. But
Um, I thought it was maybe also a comment on the sort of gun laws in France, where it's like they're not really like, from a weapons point of view, probably things are not as readily available there.
that's definitely
Um,
true. But they still have cops who have guns, and they still have an
true, true,
arm. They have an
but
army.
I think to me it's like a little bit of a commentary on,
Yeah, it
you
could
know.
be.
But anyway, that's what I was thinking when I was like, oh, okay, they're gonna go this route. But in any case, we've got, a
Daryl's
lot of
killed a guy.
yeah, Daryl's killed a guy, and then things turn quickly. Um,
The other
in
guy is killed by Maribel, who says save the powder when Daryl's about to shoot him with a flintlock. Daryl's also been wounded in this exchange on his neck, shoulder area, and just as he asks for help from Maribel and Guillaume, I did not see this flip coming.
um,
They quickly brain him, rob him, and leave, and he blurrily sees someone else arriving, who we can recognize by the headscarf. It's like a maroon color on her head, that it's the woman who was watching him earlier. And then he passes out. But it was like, wow, that was you got to keep your head on a swivel here in France. People will show up, you rescue the people you were with from the people who just showed up, and then the people you were with are going to roll on you and beat you up and rob you. Man, just goes to show this is why we can't have nice things. But he does get saved.
he does.
But also being saved looks like he might lose an arm at the beginning of his saved
But
portion
no,
of the
no,
story.
no, just cauterized with a hot iron, a hot poker.
Yeah,
Um, and then there's a lot of like kind of Florence Nightingale-esque slash weird nun things happening with the healing of him and he comes to in a monastery. It feels a little bit ethereal and strange and dreamlike, and this fighting nun comes and like talks to him, and there's a lot of like, you know, handsiness with him healing, like especially in the tub. It's a little weird. Um,
Yeah, that felt a little strange. She puts her hands on him, and you could, but the thing is, he's also uncomfortable with it. Like, so I
oh
think
yeah,
he's just the surrogate for the audience there. He's like, why is this nun touching me in the bath?
yeah, and it's like really touching him. It's just like, what are you doing? And there's like a whole conversation between them, and it's really like, he's pretty open about his abuse, but that's also a part of why he is pretty uh I don't know, like does not necessarily like, and it's certainly after his experience with these other people turning on him, you could imagine he's probably a little bit more on guard. Although in this case, he's just like, I'm in the bath and she's touching me and I don't know what to do. And like, you know, that all resolves except, when he comments on her scars, she kind of reacts in a very different way, which is
Like
kind of
you, I
interesting.
can talk about your scars, but you cannot talk about mine. Thank
Yeah,
you.
yeah. So anyway, they've got all that going on. And there's a little bit of sort of setup in terms of what this place is. It's like a, you know, sort of like a sanctuary for everybody.
Yeah, because she has all that like she has Taoist stuff on the walls, and
Yeah.
um yeah, it's just like this is a welcoming place. These are clearly good guys, they don't come across as scary nuns at all, except for the fact that they have a weapons room and they've trained to use the weapons. Oh man, let's get to that scene when we get to it. But the weapons room is well stocked with, I guess, ancient weapons that are well maintained. There's a radio that Daryl's extremely interested in, and then he's walked around the rest of the monastery, including to the uh, central, what is that, cloister, where he enjoys some rustic looking bread and water. And we kind of see Laurent for the first time. Well, not for the first time. The first time was out the window where he was like playing with the nuns. That was a sweet scene too. But now this is the scene where he mimics everything that Daryl does.
Yeah, this is a very Spielberg like scene. Like Spielberg does this a lot with like kids mimicking sort of parental figures or people they admire. The one that I of course springs to mind is the one from Jaws with Brody and his son, where they're like sitting at the dinner table and the kids like mimicking everything the dad's eating in very much this way.
Hmm.
So that was like, I see what you're doing there. So yeah, and Daryl doesn't seem to really like either it's not registering or he finally notices what Laurent is doing, I guess, but like takes a while and it's just like if you're sitting across the courtyard and like what is this kid doing? I don't know. And
Yeah.
he's noticing like the nuns talking about him and I don't know. It's a really
He's trying to take it all in. He's trying to figure out what his options are, I think, but he does seem relaxed and not on guard. But then Laurent comes over to him and does this thing that French people can do with language, where he introduces himself and takes the name. Hey, how's it going? My name's Laurent, and he like boils his name down into half a syllable. And I'm just like, if I was Daryl, I would not know what that kid had just said to me. Otherwise, his English is like excellent. This kid, who was definitely born during the zombie apocalypse, but he's been taught by nuns, so that
and
that one makes sense.
and Père Jean or whatever his name is.
Père
So
Jean, yes, who has been name dropped a couple times. Once was in the past tense.
mhm.
Yeah, because Père Jean was a fan of World War II history. I think because they have a World War II weapon wall, also in addition to their night wall. This again, like this weird, like everything is historical. They have no modern anything. It's like the most modern stuff is 1940s. Like that's wild. As just like a production note. But Laurent comes across as this extremely precocious young boy, tween. He's probably 10 or something, 11. Um, and they have this incredible conversation. Well, it's only a few words, a few lines of text probably, but he's talking about like how many people do you think are left in France? There were 67 million before the zombies. Now I think there's 200,000. And Daryl's like, I think it's way less than that. And they just go back and forth. And Laurent talks about feeling things in his stomach, about how difficult it's going to be to bring back society. I just thought that they were setting this kid up well, and this kid seems well cast to be a child who is more than he seems, or at least a child who seems to be more than he should be. Um, it's not surprising later when Isabel, the main nun, is like, oh, he's the Messiah.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like you're not like, oh my God, where did that come from? No, you're like, oh no, this kid, he talks about feeling things in his stomach. He talks about he says he feels things in his stomach twice in that conversation. It was like, I feel it in my stomach when we're going to repopulate France, and I feel it in my stomach that you're a good guy, he says to Daryl. I feel like something along those lines. Oh
Yeah,
no, and he says you deserve a happy ending too. And we've already had that flashback
from
with,
Judith, and
with
we,
Judith saying that. And so with that line, and Norman Reedus does a good reaction or not reaction shot of that, as Daryl is wont to not react to things. Uh, that's huge. That's a major thing, and it's surprising to me that Daryl manages not to get sucked into the mission, the quest, faster than he does.
yeah, because you think that he's already kind of set up with that trigger, and that definitely hit home with him when the kid says that.
Yeah, I mean, how could it not?
Right.
He was having a
Um,
dream about Judith and Carol just that morning, like because we
mhm.
had a little flashback. Wow.
Yeah, so yeah, I don't know. He's, he's healing. He also is very uncomfortable generally in places of peace and he's like restless and always wants to kind of go on. We already know that he's feeling a little bit like a failure based on the thing that he said on the tape recorder, that he felt like, he wanted people to know that he was trying to do it just in case something happened to him.
Trying
We
to
don't,
do what?
yeah, but that's what we don't know. I
The
mean, we
thing
don't,
is, in the flashback, he said he was going to look for Rick and Michonne.
right.
Well, he doesn't say that exactly, but he says, "I'm going to go find them. They're out there somewhere."
Yep. Um,
But then the rest of this episode, he's like, "I went out looking for something."
yeah, so we don't exactly know. And he's very focused on getting to like a port or getting somewhere to get back home. So we know that. And look, this isn't Daryl's first rodeo, so he's always been in these situations where there's like weird factions and things like that. And maybe he's just tired and had enough of that. And so, um I think he's like, he's always a reluctant hero, right?
Yeah,
So it always takes a minute to get him involved in things. So this
yeah.
isn't totally shocking that this is how this all played out, right?
I
Um,
guess I guess not. I just when he like leaves the convent and is after Isabel has been like feverishly trying to get him to agree to take Laurent to Paris. Like that's the mission that she wants to that Père Jean was supposed to do. That then he became a zombie somehow. They don't really go into how that happened, but now they need a messenger. And Laurent had drawn a picture of Daryl 3 weeks ago.
yeah,
Um,
mm, yeah,
it's a good picture.
sure.
Daryl's kind of mean about it. He's like, he should stick to math.
I know, it's so mean. But yeah, it's a little far-fetched, and like there's definitely, we see where this is going. Like there's a whole lot of talk about faith
Mm-hmm.
and and he's given the hard sell that, okay, well, maybe you don't believe it, but it could be that. So don't you want to have hope? So he's different and just bring him to this place. And like Daryl's just like, oh gosh, like another kid that I'm gonna get like saddled with or have to go and do this thing with. And I think he's also hesitant because he doesn't want to lose anybody else. Um, but and he's also seen some evidence of the fact that these people are a little nutty. Um,
Yeah, because they still
with
have Père Jean locked
yeah,
up in a room as a
and they say
zombie.
something like, "Oh, they're waiting for him for the reawakening" or something like that, and it's like, and we've seen this many times before with people that do this, and it doesn't usually end well,
No,
um, for the people that are holding them. Um, so I think that his instincts are, I'm just going to get out of here, and of course, he, you just get dragged back in because he just can't help himself. But I will say the part where it's like he hears the cars coming down the road of the you know gorillas or whatever they want to call them, Guerriere, and he hears them and he hides, not very well, but at least he
Yeah,
hides.
he hides behind a small shrub. We've also had a scene of three soldiers accosting Isabel and Guillaume on the road. I wasn't sure we were going to revisit these two characters, the people who turned on Daryl after he tried to save them. They are reading his English to French like phrase book and laughing about how the phrase pear-shaped means it's not a situation that's going well, and they think that's funny. And then we can hear the truck pulling up behind them. We can hear it, but it takes a while for them to turn around, and they certainly are not out of sight. They try to hold out in giving information about the death of two soldiers. I feel like they might have been able to just spin it right away, but instead it doesn't go well. Guillaume is killed, and Isabel is dragged away after she says that the Daryl basically had tried to rob her and her grandfather, and that the Guerriers had tried to save her, which is plausible. Although we don't know the Guerriers, maybe they're not in the habit of saving people. We certainly haven't seen anything that would suggest that they are. But so she's taken away by this guy with Mike Tyson style face tattoos, who seems like a medium-sized big bad, maybe a small big bad, a regional big bad, we'll say.
Yes.
They're taken away, and he's like, all right, like, we're going to the convent. Oh no, they go back to the scene of the crime. It turns out one of the guys is Michel, his little brother, and he's very upset, and he finds a flyer to the convent, which I don't know why she would have put one there. Like, that
But
makes no sense.
this was like one of those other things. I'm like, okay, you just killed a couple dudes. Like, why would you make it evident where you were? And, this all just, again, a little bit implausible in terms of like, I don't know, finding those things that, like these clues that are just would never have just sort of been dropped, but cool. That's what they did. And here we go.
Yeah.
Um, and they know what the convent is. Like they even know the name of like one of the sisters there because somebody knows that she's the one who drops the flyers, all that kind of jazz. So
So then Daryl hears, like, after all the convincing has failed, Daryl has left the convent, but is only like, I don't know, a few hundred feet, maybe if that, down the road when he hears the three
barely
vehicles.
barely hides behind like a tree. It's
Yeah.
like not even great.
He hides behind this little shrub, and these three vehicles stop outside the convent. 7 guys get out, including the regional big bad. He talks his way inside, and she knows him. The Mother Superior, I forget her name, but she's like, "Oh, Mr. Cadron, we're praying right now." And he's like, "Look, I'm coming in no matter what. We're looking for American fugitive." So then they start to search. They, for some reason, why do you think they want to hide? Oh, I know why. Because they try to steal Laurent as soon as they find him. But
Yeah,
so
they
it
want to
is,
add
yeah,
people to their like basically they're trying to indoctrinate people into their
yeah.
little army. So that's
Like,
why.
this kid will be a child soldier.
Right.
So yeah, Isabel tries to get Laurent to hide himself in Père Jean's office, and she's like, "Lock the door, and then don't come out." And it goes a
Okay.
little Carl Grimes here, but I
Oh,
don't
not
hate this destroy. I don't hate this decision. The fact that
why?
he forgets to lock the door until the baddies are right outside, so they hear
Uh,
it. I was like, "Yep, that checks out."
so annoying because she's like, lock it right behind me. How long did it take him to do it? Like 20 minutes?
Minutes. It
Like,
was
come
minutes for
on.
sure. Yeah, and then but then they don't come in because Père Jean is discovered, and they have to all like talk about, why do you have a zombie here? Um, and then then Laurent decides to leave the office, which I also don't hate because they know somebody's in there. They're gonna come and check it later. But instead of what happens, he should have just gone and found a new place to hide. Would have probably helped. They kill Père Jean against the wishes of the nuns. The nuns are upset by this, but I feel like that's their one weak spot. The nuns, they got everything else dialed in.
Mm.
Well, that and weapons. But then Laurent sees that Père Jean has been executed and runs to be like, "Oh, Père Jean." And Mr. Caudron says, "Oh, this kid, he's coming with us. He can't be here." And that is when Daryl appears and murders one guy and then runs away. This leads to a big fracas. The
Mhm.
nuns go get their weapons, and the scene is just it's tragic. I'm trying to figure out if it should have gone a different way. But there's a standoff of 3 baddies to 8 nuns in the courtyard.
And okay, so she makes a big deal. Isabel makes a big deal out of the fact that they have trained in these weapons. And if you're gonna say that, then I guess that the these baddies have guns, and that makes a difference when you're going against medieval weapons, sure. But they really pause here in a way that doesn't make sense when you see that the dudes are having guns and you have like crossbows and like other and like spears and maces and things like that. Like probably you should just get in on the action and catch them, use the element of surprise. But it's almost like they stand there and they wait for them to shoot them.
Yeah, they do. That
And
that I think
that's
is bad
really
choreography.
depressing. Really depressing.
Yeah, I think it's supposed to be depressing, but maybe if they'd had the same outcome but not had the nuns wait to be shot, because
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, they wait to be shot and then they charge. No, like two of the nuns are already dead before the battle even begins.
Look, I think it's fine to show that they're out-weaponed because that's true.
Yeah, yeah,
It's just the way that they kind of I don't know, and maybe it's they're hesitating because they're nuns and they don't want to.
right. They're not actually soldiers. They're scared of Daryl walking around unarmed in the
Right, right.
tour
So
earlier. So
maybe that's
maybe
what we're supposed to surmise, but it's still a little, it's
it
still
doesn't
fun.
look like fear, but we're focusing on this other nun who is unnamed, but we've had in several shots and is singing at toward the end of the episode.
Also in
Like
a very odd way, but let's go.
she is the focus of this scene, and she looks determined. Also,
Mhm.
she's the only survivor of this battle. But so yeah, 8 nuns dead, 3 soldiers dead. That leaves what, 4 soldiers? Is that right? No, there were 7 initially. There's 4 dead, so 3 are still alive. Cadron, the young guy, and another red shirt. Red shirt is killed, we think, by Daryl. And then I forget how Philippe, the young soldier, died. Do you remember? It doesn't really matter.
Yeah, I don't
I
know.
think he's shot by Codron actually, because of how Daryl is putting him in the way in between them. It goes poorly. Daryl's actually getting his ass kicked,
Yep.
but I think
Once
Isabel
again,
bails him out.
to be once again in a similar fashion as the last time is rescued by Isabel. He's on the ground and she takes care of business.
Yeah, but Codron gets away, and even though Daryl shoots him once or twice, and shoots at him until he gets away, basically, we know that Codron, as a regional big bad, is going to be a problem later. And
I also know this because of he's hanging out outside and
well, this was the 4th time that the vehicle, or the 3rd time that the
right.
vehicle approached the convent, and nobody was aware. I just
Yeah.
feel like in a countryside with 5 cars, you're
You're
gonna
gonna
know when one of them's around.
Mhm.
However, maybe it was drowned out by the singing, because that was during the campfire bonfire
Yeah.
scene.
And the singing was weird. Like the way they cut that in was very strange.
Eh,
Suddenly it's like Laurent's like accompanying the nun. It was very odd. And then they have this little like side conversation with Daryl and Isabel, and it was like, all right. And then he's agreeing. He's like, all right. It was like that was like a little Indiana Jones. It's like, you get me to the port, I'll take you there. Like, like reluctantly. Like there's definitely like an Indiana Jones Han Solo-esque vibe going on here.
yeah, I don't
And
like that they also have not introduced the singing nun. What hers is her
right, we
name?
don't even know
There's
her name. We've seen her give him food, we've seen her battle,
yeah,
give him like sort of side eye here and there, but
and
what
now
is
she's
her name?
now she's singing and still no, not
She's also
even like a
there,
credit.
right? And she's like also there for the death of the Mother Superior, but no
Right.
introduction. Like, who is she? I would like to know her name. Thank you. She does sing
Yeah.
very well. She's got a good voice.
Yeah. But the deal is made. I will take you where you need to go if you can get me to the port at Le Havre, which is not how you say that in French, but it's the way I know how to say it. I think it's Le Havre.
Yeah,
I'm not even
probably
sure.
not. But
And
and we get
yes, there is a scene in at that very port
yep,
where I was like, sure, yeah, right. There's still boats coming and going from there.
yeah,
BS.
yeah.
But then it turns out to be not only plausible, but it's actually how Daryl got to France. It even turns out like crazy. This is a freight ship, like a container ship, and they're
Yeah,
moving
massive.
things on and off, and they've got a lot of people wearing police riot gear. They almost feel like a CRM, but not as futuristic.
Yeah,
And there's a very despotic feeling lady boss who is, I think, the big bad, not a regional big bad like Codron.
true.
She's like the national big bad, perhaps. And she's giving the captain of the ship a hard time because somebody caused some problems, destroyed some research, and was thrown overboard and presumed dead. And that person's last name was Dixon. And she's like, go find this Dixon in
All
all
right,
of
but
France.
that's the thing. It's like, where are you gonna find him? You're gonna scour what? Like, you have limited amounts of fuel, but a lot of fuel to keep these boats going. We don't know what the whole deal is with this whole thing, but that he caused some kind of a mutiny and escaped. And she's just really focused on the fact that maybe, just maybe, he survived. And yes, we know he did, but it would be more likely that he didn't. And even if he did, who really cares? Like, I think we have to fill in a few more details about what is at stake here, other than just this is a big bad, like weird organization.
Yeah.
Um, and
We
again,
also we also know that there were prisoners on the boat, a mutiny
yeah,
as you described, and there are zombies that they're using as test subjects.
right.
We really don't have a lot of information here, and they brought these from the States, is what we're thinking, like because Daryl was brought from the States, so they're moving zombies between the coasts. Definitely a lot of gaps to fill in with this one.
Yeah. But I mean, more to come, I'm sure. And I'm sure we'll get a little bit more information as we go on. But overall, like despite my, sort of snarkiness about a few of these decisions, I did like it. I like that we have them in we have like a different setting finally. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I do think that this is more successful than Dead City for a couple of reasons. And one is that it's a little bit more open. Like the city scenes in Dead City could all just be on a set, and probably a lot of them were.
Yeah.
It doesn't really feel like New York. Maybe it's also because I don't know France very well, but at least this feels like a different part of the world. So that's kind of cool. And I
It
like
doesn't
having
look like Georgia either, which is nice. Like you could tell
true.
this is in Southern Europe. This is
Right, right,
like the
right.
landscapes are great. Yeah, so I
So
do
that's
like
kind
that.
of nice. And having Daryl negotiate and navigate like this different thing is kind of cool. And we'll have to see what happens with the walkers and why there's these like different varieties. I'm sure they'll come out with that at some point. But I did, maybe there's like similar to like the radiation zombies, maybe there's something that happened to them when they turned, or there's somebody who turned them, and maybe that's sort of part of the mystery with the boat and the experiments that they're doing.
We'll
So
find
I
out,
guess more to
hopefully.
come on that.
Yeah. And there's only 6 episodes, I think, in this whole season. So we don't have to wait too long to see where they're trying to take us. There is a second season.
Yeah.
Filming had begun, but then it's continuing due to an agreement between AMC and SAG-AFTRA in Europe. À ce moment, as they might say, except they would say it way better than that in France.
Yep.
So yeah, I don't know that I can say I like this better than Dead City because one episode is only one episode, but yeah, so far I agree, from the production standpoint, I agree with you. The city in the New York scenes, a lot of it was indoors because of, well, for probably good reasons. The outdoor stuff was often at night and did feel like it was probably on a set or green screen. There, I will also say that like his arrival in France to the first zombie we really see, it feels like a long time. And the
Mm,
first zombies we see is when he's on that aqueduct, and there's a really distant shot showing some CG
yeah.
zombies on a different level of it, which I thought was kind of that's not
Those
how I want.
those Roman aqueducts though have some staying power.
They're still around.
Yep.
They're still around. Yeah, good engineering. But a great episode, and I'm looking forward to more of this show, and I'm looking forward to more French and more scenes of Daryl learning French, perhaps.
Yep.
That would make me.
We'll have to see him do that and sign language at the same time.
Yeah. So I guess we'll continue along with this ride. I believe the second episode airs the day we're recording this, so we'll be a week behind.
Mhm.
But barring any incidents, we should be able to stay along with this one and and do a fairly fresh bunch of hot takes for Reanimated, only being 1 week after they air.
Yeah, indeed. So, uh, if you'd like to tell us what you think about the first episode, please email us at reanimatedpodcast@gmail.com.
Yeah, and you can find the rest of our episodes on reanimated.podbean.com. And if you are so inclined, you can also leave us a review on your podcast listening platform of choice. That might help us out in this labor of love. So I will wish you all,
I just
yeah,
can't.
there's au revoir. Au
Yeah.
revoir.
Oh,
Comme
goodness.
ci, comme ça.
Ah,
We'll stop speaking French. We'll wish you all a pleasant rest of your day, and check us out next time on Reanimated for more Daryl Dixon.
indeed.
Bye bye.
Bye.